Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Monsieur Daly. I was going to go with an accent there, so I said Daly, and then I said my own last name wrong. My name is Monsieur Daly, and this is my lobby boy, Maddie.
'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe.
Yes, very good, Matt. Bring the towels to room 241.
Yes, sir.
This week on the show, it is time for another one of our Doof Canon episodes. Matt, what are these?
Well, once a month, those individuals who donate to us on Patreon at the Doof Council of Doof level will get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the Doof Canon. Scott and I, and maybe some guests, will meet, talk about the movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But of course, as always, we leave that final decision up to you folks. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find the link in the show notes of this very episode to cast your vote. Matt, what has our council brought for us this month?
This month, the council has nominated and our patrons have voted on the 2014 Wes Anderson film, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh, man, I cannot wait to talk about this movie with you, Matt. We actually have talked about this movie on the podcast before, many, many years ago in the before times, before we even, on the feed that is attached to this, was a different show. We did a Deconstructing Wes Anderson episode. Back in that time, we would do a whole director's movies in one episode. I don't know how we did that, but we used to do it, and so we talked about this movie very briefly on that episode, but never have dove into it in the amount of detail I think it deserves.
Absolutely. I mean, Wes Anderson, I think, is a director that we've considered for a full Deconstructing Director series, and I do like his movies enough that I think that would be realistic, so I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't put it past us to actually just circle back around and do a full series on him. He's a very interesting director that I think there's a lot to talk about. And I want to revisit Isle of Dogs, which is a movie I did not love. And I still embarrassingly have not seen The French Dispatch. I'm ashamed to admit that.
Yeah, I haven't either, which is really, really weird, actually. I guess it's one of those things where I just forget these things exist unless they're being advertised at me, you know?
Well, here, I'm going to just create the Matt Freeman advertisement campaign where I'm just going to advertise to you movies. Like, you're going to get an ad in your email box and on your cell phone once a week that's just going to tell you about all the new movies. Yeah,
with links to like trailers and stuff.
Exactly.
That's a good idea, Scott.
Would you give me money for it?
Maybe you can do this as a service. Well, if you do a good job at it, maybe like the studios will notice and they'll pay you.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk all about the Grand Budapest Hotel, and then we're going to finish up the episode. Matt and I finally saw the Marvel Cinematic Universe film The Eternals because it hit Disney Plus this past couple weeks, and we finally both watched it, and we've got some things to say about that.
A short list of things.
And then we're going to do a quick update on the state of the streaming wars of this great, wonderful streaming world we live in now. How's it going? How are the companies doing? We're going to talk about it because I think it's pretty interesting what's been happening.
Yeah, things just keep evolving and ever changing in ever surprising ways.
Very much so. Very much so. All right, Matt, let's get into our movie first, though. Let's talk all about the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Why do you want to be a lobby boy?
Who wouldn't? At the Grand Budapest, sir.
And so my life began. Junior lobby boy in training under the strict command of Monsieur Gustav H. Many of the hotel's most valued and distinguished guests came for him.
I love you.
I love you. She was dynamite in the sack, by the way.
She was 84.
I've had older.
This was also when I met Agatha.
She's charming. She's so charming.
Is he flirting with you?
Yes.
I approve of this union.
I became his pupil, and he was to be my counselor and guardian.
The police are here.
Tell them I'll be right down. She's been murdered, and you think I did it.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A writer encounters the owner of an aging high-class hotel who tells him of his early years serving as a lobby boy and the hotel's glorious years under an exceptional concierge.
It's too many uses of the word years in one sentence. It bothers me.
Yep. And also it does that thing that I see so often where it talks about the framing story in a way that makes it seem way more important than it actually is.
That is the whole story. Yeah. This movie was, of course, written and directed by Wes Anderson with a story credit for Hugo Guinness. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Tony Revolori, Saoirse Ronan, and like everyone else that's usually in a Wes Anderson movie. Like, I'm not going to list them all, but pretty much anyone you can think of that would be in a Wes Anderson film is in this one.
Bill Murray, Willem Dafoe, Ed Norton, et cetera.
This movie, Matt, was I think was and still is Wes Anderson's highest grossing film. This was the most popular by just a money perspective film that he has ever released. And I love this movie so much. I don't like to play the game of my favorite Wes Anderson film, and maybe one of the reasons why I'm avoiding doing our full Deconstructing Director series because ranking these movies seems like a task that would just make me absolutely miserable. But there have definitely been multiple times throughout the years since this movie came out that I would have happily told you this is my favorite Wes Anderson movie. What did you think of the Grand Budapest Hotel?
I love this movie as well. I share your hesitancy to rank the Wes Anderson films, but if I were to be irresponsible, I would put this one at or near the top, just off the cuff. It's everything that he does right, and none of the things in his other films that I think maybe don't quite work on me, at least. So it's sort of the perfect film from my perspective, in particular, perfect Wes Anderson film anyway. It's the classic thing that he does where, well, he's just a master of tone, I think is where to start with Wes Anderson for me. That's how I think of it anyway. He's a master of balancing between making you like care extremely deeply about characters while also making the story sort of whimsyful and fantastical and borderline magical realism at times. Yeah. And then swinging seamlessly and without any sense of vertigo into just extremely sad. And he does this, he does this all over the place in all of his films, but I think this is maybe his most kind of elegantly successful at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this movie, like, I think this is true across Wes Anderson's films, but this movie never, like, there's a lot of movies that kind of try throughout the film to mask the fact that this is a story or this is a movie. This movie never does that. Like, every time an action sequence happens, it is so unbelievably fake looking. Like it just like this chase sequence in the snow down the mountain is like built to look like not real, right? It's like built like it's I don't actually know what he did there. I think it's miniatures, and even the scenes that have people in it, it's filmed at like a lower frame rate, so it seems clunkier and choppier, and it's not built to look like a real thing. And he's never trying to mask the fact that this is a story. And the thing I love about this is I think you're totally right that underneath all this is this ocean of loneliness and sadness and despair, which again is true in all Wes Anderson movies. But I think what this one does is it contextualizes this back and forth push and pull between the whimsy, the wit, and the beauty and the despair in a distinct, intentional way that I don't think any of his movies have ever done. Because I think this is a movie about the push and pull and the tone management between whimsy and wit and horror and despair.
Yeah, I mean, I think it functions as a sort of within the frame of the story piece of the narrative story, because what we have is, we have this very genteel, cultured, polite man telling a story about stuff that happened to him. And in kind of the way where if you're telling a very sad story to someone that you don't know very well, you'll sort of try to brighten it up a little bit. Like you'll make it seem like certain things weren't really all that bad, or, maybe make things certain things seem funny, but then if there's a core of the story that's just absolutely heart-wrenching, you'll dance around it, but eventually you have to come to it because it's a core part of the story. And that's what happens in this film is, there's several times that he kind of comes up to the point of talking about his beloved
Agatha,
and then is like, but we won't discuss that. And then he has to come back to it because like he realizes this is a story that he has to tell. And that plays into the thing that he's doing with the tone, where you can imagine that the reason why certain things in the framing story feel, or in not the framing story, in the told story feel whimsical is because like the storyteller is making them feel whimsical. The reason the action scene feels ridiculous is because maybe he's telling it in a way that makes it seem exaggeratedly, comically over the top ridiculous and not, not something that could ever happen or something along those lines. Right. And it works into the fact that it's a told story, I think.
Yeah. And I think we can't forget that we're dealing with multiple nested layers here, right? This is almost Stephen King-esque in the fact that what's actually happening is we are watching a story told by the man who lived it to an author who wrote it, which is being read by a girl sitting in front of the statue of the author, right? So like we're actually like 3 deep into this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And the like it's 4 deep, I think, because the young girl's reading it. It's the author as an old man reciting it based on what he remembered. The author as a young man being told it by the person who lived it when he was a young man. Like there's a lot of nested layers of this going on here. And I think that's very important to what the movie's trying to do, because I think the movie is saying a lot of things about how we depict these moments in our lives and how we tell those stories and how those stories are passed down. I think this is a movie that is really rather tragic in a lot of ways. Like Gustav does not make it out of this movie alive. He is killed senselessly and violently. And there's that wonderful kind of final line of the film where he says the world that he lived in was gone before he was even born into this one, or something to that effect, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's this kind of tragic tale about this person who never really lived in the world that he wanted it to be. But the cool thing about storytelling is now his story in that world gets to move on. And I do think that's why the whimsy is played up a little bit, because I think Zero wants to show a version of the world that was Gustav's world. Like he wants that to be his world. And of course the nature of the story is eventually horror will enter that story, because that's what really happened. But he's going to play up the whimsy. He's going to play up that part a lot. And of course, then the author is going to be absorbed into that and play up on it. And of course, that is the thing that's going to speak so well to the young girl. I mean, the cover of the book, The Grand Budapest Hotel, that she is reading at the beginning of this, it looks exactly like the one that we see in Zero's story, but not the one that the author saw when he was staying there. Mm-hmm. And so we get the idea that this is the version of events that Zero told to everyone is the version of events that everyone came to accept. And so the whimsy and the hope and the world that Gustav wanted to live in, or wished he could live in, or maybe for a brief moment did live in, has been created inside this story. And there's a statue to this author at the beginning of the movie, right? Like this is, I think he's called like the son of the city or something. Like he has been honored by this city for creating this story, or at least transposing this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that maybe Gustav made the hotel into kind of a little sliver of the world that he wanted. Mm-hmm. But then he goes out into the real world, and it's kind of horrible. Whenever I watch this movie, I'm just so struck by the 2 parallel scenes, or the 2 mirrored scenes, you could say, where the first time the death squad comes onto the train and is going to probably just murder Zero for being an immigrant, I guess. I know so little about World War I history beyond what we're sort of. I mean, I don't even think this is like, none of this is real. I mean, it's supposed to mirror the World War, but like none of the countries are real. None of they were going to murder him because he was an immigrant. Yeah. And Gustav successfully gets out of the situation by, sort of throwing a fit, which maybe wouldn't have worked, except it just so happens that Ed Norton, who speaks in an American accent, despite the fact that all of the other stormtroopers speak in like a thick Germanic accent or whatever, is there to be like, oh, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. This is just so uncouth. How dare you, you know? And just sort everything out, right? And then like that's like a piece of Gustav's world maintaining the frame of like sanity and dignity and nobility. Yeah. And then when that scene recurs at the end, it's like, no, you don't have your spokesman here. Like this is the guys who come onto the train at the end. They look like they're from a different movie, you know, like they look like they're from, you know, Saving Private Ryan or something. Like they're just killers.
And the scene is in black and white at the end. The literal color has been drained from the world, and the scene is in black and white. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it just, you know, it plays out the realistic way, the sad, pointless, ignoble way. And I don't know. I'm always struck by the fact that it's almost exactly the same scene twice, and the one time he's bailed out by a coincidence, and the second time there's, you know, the dice come up snake eyes, and
and it's, to me, it's not even that it's a coincidence. To me, it's that like his power as Monsieur, you know, the concierge of the Grand Budapest Hotel, because that's really it's Edward Norton's character being there, but also him having a personal relationship with Edward Norton's character through his time as Gustav as concierge of the Grand Budapest. You know, it's like this world in which everyone knows. You know, it's interesting because a concierge is not like a high status role, right? Like in a real world, high status at the hotel, and because it's a fine hotel, but you're basically like a glorified gopher. Like you exist at the pleasure of your guests, and that's it. But in this world, because this is such a high class, wonderful hotel, he is just the highest of the high class, and merely seeing him, you know, lets people like, oh, I'm so sorry, Monsieur. Like and you're right that Edward Norton as a character is a member of this Death Squad army, but he doesn't fit. He doesn't belong in this group. Like it's almost as if to say that this is not real. Like this is not the real world. This is the world we wish it was. And by playing those scenes back to back, we'll say now Edward Norton is gone, and the card that he gave you that promises safe passage is meaningless because that's just not where we are anymore. And your status symbol, not only, and that's the other thing too. In the beginning of the movie, he's just a concierge. At the end of the movie, he's a rich aristocrat, basically. Like he has inherited money and land and title from a countess, basically. And so he technically has more power than he's ever had, and it is meaningless.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know how much of this is like meant as a direct commentary on World War I specifically, because you could argue World War I is just sort of a dramatic backdrop to this story. But I don't necessarily want to say that, because I feel like so much of what the story is about is the fact that like it's a story about the world losing this specific kind of nobility, because you know people like Edward Norton, that character, of course, were the ones who sort of were like, yes, we should go to war with the Prussia or whatever because of honor, and then like tens of millions of people are killed, and it's the worst thing that has ever happened up to that point in history. Like we don't really. It's hard to actually face up to how horrible that war was, and it basically destroyed Europe. And I think that, I think maybe that's part of it. Maybe the reason the hotel looks so crummy, you know, in the later timeline is like, this is sort of the metaphysical consequence of that war. You know what I mean? I don't know. Do you have any insight here?
So, at the end of the movie, it says this movie was based off of the writing of a writer named Stefan Zweig, who was a Austria-Hungary person who lived in Vienna and fled Vienna after World War II, I believe. He watched Vienna during World War I kind of get horribly destroyed. And then as World War II was really starting to ramp up, he kind of saw the writing on the wall and fled to Brazil. And he and his wife committed suicide there. And so he wrote these books kind of like longingly about this idea of a lost place. Vienna to him was used as like a symbol for more than just, a beautiful physical place, but like a type of world, a type of existence that was forever lost when this horrible violence came to the city. And I think a lot of the design of this movie is based off of the way he described Vienna in his writing. I know that a lot of the characters in this movie kind of are based off of his look as well. I think the Gustav is kind of made to look a little bit like him. The writer is looked to the author rather is looked to dress a little bit like him. So I absolutely think that is something that specific that's going on here. Although Anderson kind of sprinkles in his unreality, and so there's no direct one-to-one tie to any real location or real place or what have you.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I was today I looked up the painting "Boy with Apple," which is sort of a MacGuffin, plot device of the film.
Yeah,
and was mildly surprised to learn that this is not a real Renaissance masterpiece. This was painted for the movie specifically.
Yeah,
and I was reading about it, and it's like the artist and the director sort of collaborated back and forth on this, where first they kind of assembled all of this like period garb, this huge kind of trove of kind of Renaissance period garb, including like props from like the Queen Elizabeth movie, and they had like the boy dress up in the Queen Elizabeth like in clothing, basically just to like give this broad palette of like looks. And then Wes Anderson basically picked what he wanted the painting to look like, or what he wanted the boy to be wearing, and very sort of intentionally making it not look like anything that anyone from the Renaissance would actually wear. Like it's like a Wes Anderson version of a Renaissance painting, basically.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like a hyper reality, magical realism version of what Wes Anderson thinks the Renaissance was like, on purpose, right? Like Wes knows that knows what he's doing here. Because he could have just told him like, yeah, make it look like a Renaissance painting, and they would have probably done a fine job. But yeah, like the painting was. I just see that as a perfect example of how every detail of the movie is intentional artifice, and not just like, okay, make it look the way that it would have looked in Hungary in the early in the early 20th century. It's like no. It's gonna look magic, whimsical, and we're gonna have these kind of pastel colors that were probably not the colors they used.
I mean, it's God. There's so much going on here, man. Because like, I think first we have like, if you look at the basic plot, right? The basic plot is this concierge sleeps with all the elderly women, like high class women that come to his hotel, and I love that. Like, God, Gustav is such a fascinating character, right? Because he's like freely saying he sleeps with these women, and like there's moments where he doesn't quite come out and say that he's doing it in hopes to get some of their money, but like we see he's getting huge tips from these women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're tipping him handsomely. And then like one of the first thing he says when Madame D dies is and maybe a few cubits for an old concierge as well. Like this is the fascinating thing about this character, because I think he puts on this air of sophistication and class and wit and whimsy, but I do think there's a piece of him like buried underneath that he really doesn't show. And I think that the perfect like metaphor of that is this idea that he is, I think Zero says he's one of the most perfumed people he's ever met, right? Like he cakes on perfume, and like his whole life is this perfume that he's caking on over whoever he is underneath. And we really don't get to see who that person is. But I do think it's really interesting how Ralph Fiennes like plays to allow a little bit of whoever Gustav is underneath to come out at times. Like, I'm speaking of like every time he cusses in this movie, like he's so prim and proper, and then every once in a while he will just have these explosive anger from within come out. Like when he loses his shit at Zero about like, why the hell did you even come to this country? You're like, like he loses his shit on him in a way that's very unproper. And then he like catches himself after he realizes he's made an ass of himself. And then there's times that Anderson plays it as jokes too. Like when they're meeting with Serge up in the mountain, and he said, they killed my sister. And he's like, the one with the club foot? And he says, yes. And he's like, the fuckers. Yeah. And it's just like, it's so unlike him. And I just think that's Fiennes kind of trying to show whoever this person was underneath kind of seeping out. Yeah. Which is really interesting because like, he's both a great, wonderful guy and probably a bit of an asshole and not that good of a person either, like, and this is a story about how like he gets to be rich and because of like, it's just so over the top and unbelievable. Yeah.
It's this very interesting dichotomy because like he's clearly manipulative. I mean, it's exactly what Zero says. Like he's shallow, vain. He's all these objectively negative qualities, and Zero is saying it from a place of love, but it's like he just does have these negative qualities, but like he's also there's something there, there's something special there, like there's something redeeming there. I love the fact that after he kind of loses his temper at Zero because he's basically he's just broke out in prison, he's been through this stressful ordeal, and then Zero hasn't brought any of the stuff he's supposed to bring, and he explodes at him, and then when when he realizes that he's being an asshole, he apologizes, but he's not like, he doesn't say like I'm so sorry. He basically says something along the lines of like it's unbecoming of the dignity of the Grand Budapest. Yeah. And to me, it's like the Grand Budapest is the totem, is the abstract part of his mask that he's created, and that's who he wants to be, and that's who he is. That's who he's chosen to be. He's the face of the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is this institution which is beloved, and it's largely through his efforts and his I think, I don't know, I really love that line, that specific line. I think that says so much about his character because, like you say, I think he probably has a past that might be maybe not as horribly sad as Zero's past is, but like something tragic, and he's run from that, and he's constructed this new existence for himself, which is the hotel, which is why he almost thinks of himself as being the hotel.
Yeah, which is really interesting, right? Because the kind of, I guess we could call it a reveal at the end of the movie. The assumption you make is that Zero is keeping the Grand Budapest, has agreed with the I guess we can call it the communist government that exists in the country now, to give up all his holdings, all his land, all his riches to keep one thing, the Grand Budapest Hotel. And I think throughout the story, you're kind of making the assumption that the reason for that is out of his love and respect for Gustav, that this place was the most important place to Gustav. This is what the place that Gustav defined himself by, and I am keeping the hotel because of Monsieur Gustav. We learn at the end of the movie that no, the reason he's keeping the hotel is because this is a memory of the happiest time he was with his wife Agatha, and so the hotel is kept for her specifically, which is really interesting because you're right. I think the hotel serves as a totem for Gustav, but that's not why Zero keeps it. And I think that shows, in many ways, I think Zero has. I'm not going to say like moved on from Gustav, but like the other line, the line that he, this was never a world that he never lived in, the world that he thought it was. Anyway, it's not like his death was a sign of him losing that world. It's more of a sign of that world never existed in the first place. And so I think Zero has processed that a lot more than he's processed the Agatha portion of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I find that really, really fascinating, because maybe what it's showing is what the Grand Budapest is different to every person. To Gustav, it was this place that represented, the utmost of refinement and high class and everything that I'm not, but I want to be, I desperately want to be. And so I'm going to make it so. But to Zero, this was the place I was happy with my wife. And it doesn't matter to me how run down it becomes, because it's just a window to those memories.
Yeah, the way that he wants to be, or even the way that he wants the world to be, because I think he kind of successfully makes the hotel into this environment of nobility and sort of the picturesque version of high society.
Sure.
Whereas, like, I think it's interesting because when we meet actual high society, it's these fucking psychopaths.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Who murder their mom, and then send Willem Dafoe, who intentionally looks like a bulldog, to go just like decapitate people. And so like that's the world that they live in is like that's what the actual upper class is like. That's what these people are actually like. But in at the Grand Budapest, everything is, a fairy tale, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you're spot on there. I mean, that's like the whole story is a fairy tale. Like the idea that in the real world, a concierge would love this woman and then she'd be murdered, but there would be a secret will only in the case of her murder, and it would get slipped into, like, the whole actual beat to beat plot of this movie is absurd. It's completely absurd, and it knows it's absurd, and it is relishing in the absurdity of it. Because, like, I mean, if you really just like track the moment to moment, so like then they steal the painting and Serge slips something into the painting before they wrap it up. They don't notice it. Then they come to arrest him for the murder. And then he breaks out of prison with this motley crew of prisoners who, by the way, horribly murder some prison guards on their way out. Like that scene is so weird to me because like Gustav has been framed. He's done nothing wrong, but he's breaking out with these men, and now he's an accomplice to multiple murders.
Yeah. So this is what I love about the told tale aspect and how that works so well with the normal Wes Anderson thing, because there are so many horribly violent things that happen in this movie that are basically a gag. Yeah. Like the guy jumps into the hole and stabs four men to death before he's brutally stabbed himself. It's a gag, right? It's supposed to be funny, and it kind of is. Because
the closing line is Gustav saying, "I guess you'd call that a draw."
Yeah, and like it's sort of slapstick in a certain way, and then like the whole thing where they murder Serge's sister and decapitate her. Like it's not. Yeah, I wouldn't say that's funny, but like you're actually just kind of relieved that it wasn't Agatha, and so. You don't really feel that as like, and also Serge is kind of a comic character. Yeah. And so you're like, well, I don't really care about that. Right. These aren't the actual stakes. This is just background murder. Yeah. This is just mildly amusing background murder. And you can imagine that like, this is Zero telling this story, and he's telling a story of intrigue and death and betrayal, and as he's telling it, he's kind of trying to spin it as like, people get killed sometimes, like it's not the biggest deal in the world, but then there's the particular two deaths that have shattered him on such a deep level that it's almost like he realizes at some part during the story, like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk about Agatha, and I'm gonna have to talk about how Gustav died. Yeah. And I think for me, like the most interesting single choice of the movie, which I don't know that anybody except Wes Anderson would do this, is what I think many people would make the sort of climactic, dramatic point of the movie is not in the movie. It's just the death squad comes on the train. Gustav tries to stand up for him. We cut away. We cut to him telling the story, and I always forget the exact line. You remember it though. he says, what happened
in the end, what happened to him? And he responds, in the end, they shot him.
Yeah. And he just says it flatly.
Mm-hmm.
And the camera just holds on that. And we don't see that scene. We don't see the emotion. We don't even get a close up of him saying that line, with tears in his eyes or anything like that. It's just this brutally matter of fact statement. And then I believe the camera pulls out a bit.
Yeah.
And I think the effect of that, for me anyway, personally, is that I imagine it in my mind. I imagine how that must have gone down. And for some reason, I feel like that is at least as effective as if they had shown that scene,
Yeah. Well, and you imagine it without any of the whimsy and the artifice and the Wes Anderson-y-ness, right? You imagine it the way it probably went, which is just they marched him off the train, stood him out in the cold, and shot him in the back of the head. They executed him. And this is in the same movie where this same group of soldiers comes to the Grand Budapest to arrest Gustav, and he sprints away, as if he's going to be able to run away from the police when they're 2 feet from him,
Right.
This is the same movie. It's the same movie that this happens in. And you're absolutely right that you would think Mr. Mustafa Zero, whatever, would want to put a spin on the death of Gustav. Either he plays up the whimsy just like he's been doing in the rest of the movie, or he builds this heroic scene where he saved me, like he died because they were going to kill me and he saved me. And he's not even really saying that.
Mm-hmm.
He's just saying, in the end, they shot him, and so it all went to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's all he says about Gustav's death. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's because that's not the story he wants to tell. He doesn't want to tell the story about the death of Gustav. He wants to tell the story about the life of Gustav. And it is so powerful. It is so powerful because there's no spin you can put on that. There's no whimsy you can put on that. That I really wonder. I don't want to psychoanalyze Wes Anderson, but I wonder if he's looking at these worlds that he creates, these worlds of whimsy that have this underlying sadness in them anyway, and really trying to inspect why he does this, why he tells stories this way, and trying to figure out, is there a reason I do this, and can I get to the bottom of that sadness and really focus on the sadness? And part of him is like, no, I can't actually. I have to break from it. I have to break from the story to be able to focus on the sadness as just sadness.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I'm not going to spoil The Life Aquatic, but I'm going to abstractly mention that one thing that I think the first time, especially, that I saw The Life Aquatic, I was actually just kind of mad at the movie for the sad thing that happens toward the end, because that just felt like, you tricked me into thinking that this was a fun, lighthearted movie, and then you did something really sad, and now I'm just sad, and that felt to me like a trick. Mm-hmm. Whereas this movie doesn't feel like a trick at all. It feels like perfectly framed around the idea of this is a super sad story, and we know that from the beginning. But the telling it as a whimsical story, just it's doing so much more than just isn't this zany and cute? It's actually, it works in favor of the message of the movie.
Yeah.
So. Why did I bring that up exactly? I guess it was just to say that sometimes the whole Wes Anderson making things whimsical and then kind of slapping you in the face abruptly thing doesn't work for me. I liked Life Aquatic overall, but that's a choice where I'm just I don't get it. I don't know why he did it that way. It just feels like a kick in the nuts with no warning. And I'm like, okay, I mean, you got me, I guess. Good job. But this is totally different from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I mean by I think Anderson is trying to inspect this about him, because Royal Tenenbaums is another example. That's an enormously sad movie about some incredibly broken people, and yet it is also a thing filled with this comedic whimsy to it. And I wonder if at any time, you're the person who's creating these things and scratching your head and just being like, why do I want to tell the story of broken people in this way? What is it about this style, this tone that I keep returning to tell these incredibly sad stories? And you're right that the Grand Budapest almost textually examines that idea through the story within the story within the story within the story. And I think the biggest example of that, more so than anything we've talked about so far, is the character of Agatha, who is a character that is almost only in the story because she has to be. This is like, I think the first time you watch this movie, Agatha feels kind of funny to you because she just kind of appears, and then she'll enter the story randomly and then disappear from the story randomly, and she's like a key player in everything that's happening, but is also like on the periphery a lot. And you realize that, well, that's because Zero doesn't want to talk about her. He doesn't actually want her to be in the story. He doesn't want, if he could tell the story without her in it, he would do it, but he can't. And so he's trying all these different methods of handling it, of kind of pushing her to the side and then realizing that, oh, wait, no, this is the part of the story where she bakes the escape tools into the Mendel's cakes. And so I literally can't tell that without having her in it. Okay, then I have to bring her in it. And then he gets like swept up in it. And so you have these shots where we just look at Agatha and it's this like close up point of view where she's looking right down the camera lens, like looking at it longingly. And you're just like, oh, Zero got a little lost in memory right now, didn't he? And then near the end of the movie, he kind of builds her into almost like a superheroic figure where she's like, you know, doing these incredibly brave things. And so he's like, okay, if I'm gonna bring her into the story, I need to build her up. But the only way I can really face talking about her is painting her as this hero of the tale, who is the one that figures everything out, who discovers the hidden will, who heroically hangs from the hotel, you know, like all these incredibly brave things Agatha does in the third act. Like you can kind of see the hand of Zero on all of this. And this is something that really, I think it does take multiple viewings to really nail down what's happening there.
Yeah, that's interesting. You might also say that, you know, perhaps all that stuff did happen, but that's exactly the kind of stuff that Zero can't bear to think about, because it's just like a reminder of what he's lost, and so he avoids it. But yeah, I don't know. I like the interpretation that Zero is putting a spin on the events.
Which is not to say that like that it didn't happen that way factually, you know. But I think everything we're seeing here is being shown to us through a lens, very specifically, technically a lens of a lens of a lens. And so the idea that it's being played up a little bit, that the way the camera depicts, like if the camera is the window to Zero's mind, which I think in the story it kind of is, then the way the camera chooses to frame Agatha in the story is very intentionally, you know, grabbing onto Zero's point of view. And this is something we haven't talked about, but this is something that the movie does, is that each story, or each layer of this story, has a different aspect ratio to it. So you know, and it's one that's kind of fitting to the time period it's being told in. So the main Gustav portion is in 4:3, is a almost square, and then we move out to different, we move, you know, ultra wide, and then, you know, your standard widescreen based on which one it is. And so like that also speaks to, this is the frame by which we're seeing it. So the 4:3 frame is almost specifically Zero's frame. And yeah, the way the camera looks at Agatha is just so fascinating, because there's these a lot of like long shots, like where she's very far away from the camera. It's almost as if like, I don't want to get too close. But then we'll cut to these extreme close-ups where it's like, I give up. I can't not get too close. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree that the close-up of her with like the lights streaming all around from the merry-go-round is like, clearly this is some memory that he is getting lost in. You almost wonder, like, he's not telling this is just maybe him like lapsing into silence and imagining this as Jude Law has another bite of steak or whatever.
Right, because like what would the part of the story be? Like, imagine the words you're describing, and then she stared into my eyes, and like, yeah, it's so and that's the fascinating thing about Agatha, is because she also has a birthmark on her cheek that looks exactly like the country of Mexico. You know, like it's this fascinating Wes Anderson quirkiness mixed in with this incredible sadness.
I mean, that's yet another funny thing where it's like if I tell somebody, yeah, they have a birthmark on their face in the shape of Mexico, like clearly what I mean, first of all, I probably wouldn't say that, but clearly what I mean is like, you know, probably basically kind of wide at the top and then it kind of narrows at the bottom.
Yeah, the general shape.
General rough shape of Mexico, not a literal stencil of the country of Mexico that is just absolutely perfect in every contour, but because it's a told story.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, sure, you know, or you could argue if as you say, it's like a picture, it's like a window into his head. I mean, she probably died like 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah,
so maybe he doesn't quite remember what her face looked like perfectly, you know, which is,
I mean, or maybe this is just an example of how the story has been distorted through the lenses, through lenses.
Yeah,
that once upon a time, Zero said a birthmark that looks like Mexico, and then Jude Law's interpretation of that was just to close his eyes and picture literal Mexico on her cheek.
Or maybe the camera is a window into the head of the girl sitting on the bench reading the book.
Yeah.
Whose interpretation is like this increasingly, you know, like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. It starts it look like things start to get exaggerated. I mean, you can even imagine like the kind of color hypersaturation being just the result of copying the same thing too many times. But you know what? One effect of that, which I maybe I'm only saying this because we just had a similar conversation about Titanic. But we were talking about the idea that in Titanic, having Rose be a character who grows old and is now in the present day and is basically telling you the story is a way of connecting you to the reality of the tragedy. It makes it feel like, oh, these are like real people. Like that's Rose. And she's just telling us a story about what happened to her. So it's not just this abstract story about old timey folks who we don't really care about. And this, while there are no living characters in the present, there is this unbroken chain of the storyteller to the writer, to the reader, to us, which kind of bridges that expanse of time and makes it feel like these are people. These are, you know, in this particular case, this didn't actually happen, but I think it stands in as the sort of tragedy of the time.
No, I think you're right there. And I think that it allows us to see, you know, if this is a big metaphor for, you know, the image of the world prior to, you know, a great world war that kind of, you know, obviously the world was not perfect before World War I. It's not like we were living in a utopia and then World War I came and everything was ruined, but like it fundamentally changed our understanding of like how conflict in the world was going to work from that point on, and a lot of lives were lost, a lot of things were destroyed. It kind of rewrote the geography of a better part of the world. And so this is a story that is allowing us to reach back and understand that on a very personal level. You know, like the war itself is a periphery to the story, like you said. Like I think that the best example of that is the newspaper that Zero gets to show Gustav, where we learn that Madame D has passed away. The front page of the newspaper is tanks amassing at border, you know, like the war is happening, and yet they are mostly concerned with the news that is personal to them, and how this, like, you know, regardless of what you're doing in your life, you're just living your life. Like they were just like, every time they're stopped on the train, they're not doing anything. They're just going to visit the city of Lutz. Like they're just going there, and the train is stopped, and the war inevitably comes to them where they live. And so, yeah, this is a way to kind of reach back and understand what was lost in a real way, even though it's fake stuff. And I think at the end of the day, that is kind of Anderson's point here. I think he's talking a lot about storytelling itself and how storytelling preserves the things that are lost in some way. It's not a perfect way. It's perhaps an idealized version, perhaps a whimsified version, but it is a way that we can peer into the lost thing.
Yeah. So just to sort of briefly go on a deconstructing director's style higher level analysis, I now that we kind of mark this out, I think that he's doing this all over the place. You know, the Life Aquatic. It's funny because one thing about the Life Aquatic that bothered me was that the underwater scenes are, you know, like paper mache fish and saran wrap and stop motion animation. Like there's no, you know, I'm somebody who loves the undersea world, and so if I go to a movie expecting to see beautiful images of the undersea world, and then I see intentionally low effort, you know, animations, then I feel a little bit betrayed. But what he's doing with that movie is he's trying to say this is how like the Jacques Cousteau underwater explorer type sees the underwater world. They see it as a magical place. They see it as it's another world. It's a release and a vacation from the concerns of reality. And of course, everything in that movie is brightly colored, but also the main character is a total fuck up, just like every other main character. You could say the same thing about not the same thing, but a similar thing about the one about the train, the
Darjeeling Limited.
Yeah, Darjeeling Limited. It's right on the tip of my brain. Darjeeling Limited is like this similarly like sort of hyper real, nostalgified, fake version of what traveling across the countryside of India on a train would be like, where it's but then also sort of like horribly shattered by tragedy at a certain point, where it's like actually this is more kind of like what this would be like, you know. So he's always playing with this idea of like portraying things as we wished that they were, or as the character, as this character sees it or feels about it, rather than as it actually is. I could probably just keep going with all of his movies, but I think I've made my point that this is a thing that he does.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we could. Examples are already leaping into my head. We don't have to go down that route, but I think you're on to that, and it makes me want to do Wes Anderson more because we could really dive into that in his other movies if we approach it from this angle. But I think you're right. I will say I still think that this is the movie in which that style and that idea and that theme kind of come together in a way that I don't think it quite does in any of his other films. In a way that just like I really strongly think this is his masterpiece. And it's not that I've said that my favorite is varying. Like I change my mind about which is my favorite Wes Anderson movie all the time, but I really do think like this one has everything. It just has, and which one I enjoy more on a personal level changes, but I think this is the best one. I really do.
Yeah, I think, you know, in our previous conversation in the before time, I might have said that Darjeeling Limited was my favorite, but I think I lean toward this movie now.
That's one of the most. We talked about this when we talked about that movie, that it's one of the most hated of his whole oeuvre, and
yeah,
I loved it on that revisit when we rewatched it for that episode. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean the only problem I have with that movie is it affects me too strongly, you know. And I'm like I have to be kind of steeled for that.
Sure.
Which, you know, I feel that way about all of his movies. Like I think, okay, honestly, half of the reason I haven't seen his new movie is that I keep forgetting that it exists. The other half is like, do I want to emotionally dynamite myself? You know, can I afford to be kind of half present all day tomorrow? You know, because that's how hard his movies usually hit me the first time I see them, at least. You know, and then I kind of process them and I can digest them next time. But
honestly, the reason for me is that I just heard it wasn't that great. And I need to stop paying attention to those things, because like that is also the reason why I hadn't yet seen Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, because I just heard it was, you know, for Edgar Wright, just not one of his best. And I watched that over the weekend and that was fucking great. So I need to stop listening and just go with my gut and watch these movies. And maybe I'll come out of it saying it wasn't that great either, but like just stop letting this influence what I watch.
Yeah. You're probably right.
Yeah. We will watch it. We will definitely watch it. And I don't want to do deconstructing Wes Anderson next, because I think we have a couple ideas of people I'm more excited to do, but I think we need to get around to this eventually for sure.
I think so.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the Grand Budapest Hotel before we pack it in for another week?
I mean, not just one thing, you know. I mean, like, the Ray Fiennes' performance is.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about any of the performances, did we?
Like all the performances are fantastic, but I think Ray Fiennes' performance is like the best.
He's got to be one of the best working actors, right? Like,
yeah.
He's good in everything, and it's such different roles in everything he does.
Yeah, we were just talking about how he disappears into like Nazi concentration camp commander and Lord Voldemort, and then he also disappears into this charming, affable, vain and insecure hotel concierge. Yeah, he's fantastic. I don't have anything else to add beyond just it's great.
Let's never forget angry, very vulgar mobster in Bruges, because he's perfect in that movie too. You know, it's funny because we just watched that whole TV show with Adrian Brody, Chapelwaite, and like when I saw him in this movie, I like didn't register that it was Adrian Brody for some reason. Like it's just I don't know. These are just like all the best actors. I don't know how Anderson does this actually, where he's just like picks up the phone and calls like the literally 25 best actors in the world and is like, hey, I'm doing another thing, and they're like, I'm in, you know, like it's ridiculous, right? Yeah, I mean, I can tell you his dialogue is fantastic and fun to perform, and he's a really nice guy that people like working with. Like like I like it's really not that complicated, right? He's just like, you know, we've talked about plenty of directors on our series that like are giant assholes that make incredible art, but do it by like making everyone around them miserable. And that is not Wes Anderson. He is incredibly detailed. He's very into the detail. He's very into production design. Like all his movies have this very distinct design to them, but he's also just like a really fucking nice guy, and the way he writes is great. It's just great. And people love performing it.
Yeah, well, good explanation.
So sometimes in this business it doesn't have to be any more complicated than people like you, because like there's a lot of assholes in Hollywood. There's a lot of assholes. And there's some people that are successful not off of their talent, which I'm not saying Wes Anderson, one of them. He's a very talented person. But just because like you cannot undervalue finishes under budget and is not a pain in the ass to work with, it, like will get you far in this industry.
And maybe there's also an element of like, you know, that he's not going to make a bad movie. Like, like it's going to be something with a ton of artistic integrity, and it's going to be something that you're proud of. Like Edward Norton is an actor in particular who strikes me as the kind of guy who just won't make any movies that he doesn't think are going to have a lot of integrity. I think I mainly say that because like he tried to be in the Hulk and it was kind of a disaster. And like largely because of him being like, I don't really feel like we're doing this as a piece of art. I feel like we're doing this as kind of a cynical, and they're like, shut up, just read the lines, and it didn't work very well for him. Anyway.
What do you think is your biggest surprise actor cameo in this movie?
Harvey Keitel.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Harvey Keitel playing a shirtless, bald, tattooed prisoner is just absolutely wild. I also think the fact that they for the madam, they just put Tilda Swinton. They just caked old age makeup on Tilda Swinton.
Oh my god,
it's
is
just
that really
wild?
Her?
Yeah, that's Tilda Swinton.
That's another actor who just vanishes into any given role. Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't recognize her. That's funny.
It's really, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a wonderful movie. I mean, like, I don't like. I didn't want to spend the whole time talking about how Wes Anderson's horizontal camera movements are so innately pleasurable to me. I just love them. But so I'll just mention it here at the end that I love how he moves horizontally. I love how he uses that for sight gags. One of my favorite gags in the movie is when they're escaping the prison escape sequence with the sheer absurd length of the ladder they get off the wall and they run by the camera, and we just see like it's just far too fucking long of a ladder. I just love that whole thing.
Yeah, love it. Me too. I'm sorry, just the guy who he like gives a pastry to, and then later that guy stops a different guy from sounding the alarm when they're escaping by cutting the guy's throat, and Ray Fiennes goes, "Oh, thank you, you kind man." And it's just like he just killed that guy.
Let's be clear here. He doesn't even give that guy a pastry. He just serves him mush.
Oh, does he? Okay, you're right.
I like to think like it doesn't make any sense that he's serving mush to people. I like to think that Gustav just like picked up the mush bucket and said, "I'm gonna walk around the prison and serve people mush."
Yeah, I'm gonna bring civilization to this prison. Yeah,
it needs a little salt.
yeah, it's great.
God, I love this movie. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the vote. And look, I don't want to be the guy that votes yes on everything that comes before us, but like if you keep putting stuff like this up, what do you want me to do? Like I can't like I'm not even gonna stop and like think about like, well, is this the Wes Anderson movie that I want in the I don't even no, the answer is yes to everything. Like, yes, this movie, yes. And I'm going to go ahead and say maybe some other Wes Anderson movie should be in the canon, but this one, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of any other Wes Anderson movie where I would be like, well, that one instead of this one. It's like, no, this is, I think you used the word masterpiece earlier, and that's the word. It's like, this is, and it's what I said at the beginning of the conversation. This is everything he does right, working perfectly, and absent of the things that I don't love. Although I do love him as a director overall, there are certain things that I'm just kind of like, it's great. It's a great film.
It is a great film. All right, so we both vote yes, and now the decision is up to you folks. So make sure you find the link in the show notes of this very episode. It will send you over to our Patreon account, and there will be a poll there to vote yes or no on the Grand Budapest Hotel getting into the canon. As always, you do not have to be an active patron to vote yes or no. It is open to the public, so you can just click that button. Unfortunately, as we said last month, for some stupid reason, you do have to be an active patron to leave a comment on the poll. So if you are a patron, please leave a comment. Let us know why you're voting yes or no. If you're not a patron and want to leave a comment, you can send it to us at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our subreddit, where there will be a thread for this very episode. Let us know what you think of this movie. Let us know if you voted yes or no, why. We want to hear from you. A lot of people don't like Wes Anderson, Matt. There's just some people that just can't get by his whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. Well, okay, I am, but I want to understand. I want to understand you.
And I feel like this movie is one where it might slip past those people's guard, because at least this film has the excuse of being a told tale rather than a why is everything so weird in this movie? I can I kind of get that, actually. Like, if there's not a reason for it, although I think he does have a reason for it, but in this case there's a very obvious reason for it. So.
Sure. Yeah. All right, that is the Grand Budapest Hotel. Happy voting, everyone, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Doof.
Okay, Matt, not the latest MCU film anymore, because wait, is it? No, because Spider-Man's technically an MCU film.
Yeah, there's one every 3 days, so
yeah, that's true. Marvel's Eternals, directed by Academy Award-winning Chloe Zhao, has hit Disney Plus. Matt and I couldn't be bothered to see this movie in the theater, but now that it's on the subscription service we already pay for, well, you might as well click play, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Matt, what did you think of Chloe Zhao's Eternals?
It was like 4 different movies cut together ineptly. That's what I think.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a really fascinating movie to me in its badness, because I don't think this is the worst movie Marvel has made. It's definitely not even close to the top. I think the thing that are fascinating to me, I think there's often moments in this movie that are very pretty, that I can understand that an Academy Award winning director, was heavily involved in this movie. And I say heavily involved despite the fact that she was the director, because it's also clear to me that there are many, 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 many sequences in this movie that 100% were not shot by Chloe Zhao. And I'm talking literally every action sequence in this movie, which is so fucking boring. The action in this movie is so bad. It's so choppy. It's so terribly directed and especially edited. The editing in this movie is a mess. It's a damn mess.
Yeah. I don't know where to start because nothing is right. Like this isn't how you do an ensemble movie. This isn't how you do action. This isn't how you do storytelling on a basic level. The whole decision to start in the past and then time skip forward, and we don't even realize what the plot of the movie is for like half an hour, and too many things, none of which cohere thematically really, and
it's too plotty. Like the twist, like even to explain the twist on this podcast, which we won't do, would require like 5 minutes to explain why a person does what they do and how that was, like it's just,
yeah.
It was a really exhausting experience for me. It really was.
There's no emotional anything anywhere at any point.
It tries to be like this. Matt, this Marvel movie has a fucking sex scene in it. There's two people banging in this movie for the first time in the MCU ever.
Well, there's two people naked lying down.
Okay, touche.
It's about as neutral of a sex scene as you could possibly film. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's time, and I feel terrible saying this. I think it's time for us to admit collectively as a people that most of the Game of Thrones actors are just not very good. Because two Game of Thrones actors are featured in this movie. Richard Madden, who played Robb Stark, who plays, I don't even remember, Superman Eternal. He's kind of like, he's laser beam
Icarus.
Eyes. Sorry, Icarus.
Yeah.
He flew too close to the sun. Good joke, movie. And then Kit Harington, who plays
character being inserted in order to be in this future movie. Literally,
which is like the most egregious example of that ever, because he literally disappears for an hour and 45 minutes of this movie and then shows up at the very end.
Just to be like, oh, I'm gonna have to be in the sequel. Oh shit. It's so annoying.
Yeah. Like, and I don't want to like, this is the thing is I'm trying as much as I can to make exclusives for Chloe Zhao, who is a director that I love. Like we talked about Nomadland last year, a movie that I think we both treasured. Like I loved that film. And I think this is like, you hire a person like Chloe Zhao to make a studio machine movie for you. And I don't know if Chloe Zhao was fully aware of what that looks like and how much control and power she would and would not have. And I don't know if the MCU, the MCU does not have an actual good track record with like auteur directors at all.
Yeah.
And I think this is another example of that.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately because we did just talk about Spider-Man. I've been thinking a lot about the old Spider-Man movies, and I was reading up about them and about how, Sam Raimi was given the right amount of power to make the movie that he wanted to make, to put in his kind of, his sense of humor, his sense of we want this to be superhero, but also we want adult emotions, and but then also it gets silly at times. Like it's Sam Raimi's fingerprints are all over the first two Spider-Man movies. The third one is bad because, I mean, reasonable people can disagree over whether it's a bad movie overall, but the problems arise because they started meddling with him. And like I like I really, really like so many Marvel movies, and I even love a couple of them. But like it just now we've been through so many of them that and especially when I contrast it with Spider-Man 1 and 2, I'm just like, man, you should have just given Chloe Zhao like control to do what she wanted to do, and it probably wouldn't have. Like the problem is, it wouldn't have had all of the shit about the Celestials, and it wouldn't it wouldn't have had everything that they needed to have to serve as episode 47 in their 3,000 movie sequence, so like I know why they're doing it, but I actually think that they're shooting themselves in the foot to a degree. I mean, the movie still made a lot of money, so I guess whatever, but I don't know. I see it. It's a confusing mess, and I agree with you that either don't hire an auteur because it's just going to be frustrating for everyone, or if you're going to hire them, let them do something weird.
Yeah, if you're going to hire an auteur, let them be an auteur. Because I think a lot of times in this movie, I can kind of, you can almost see the dotted lines between the things that Chloe Zhao is desperately trying to do with this story and the walls that she's bumping up against of what is expected of this movie to do. Yeah. Because I do think like there's a blueprint for a lot of interesting stuff here. I think the characters have a chance of being really interesting characters that are exploring things that the MCU hasn't quite explored yet. And it all comes up against the requirements of this machine. And it can't, both things cannot coexist, and so we get this jumbled, choppy mess where we're like cutting back and forth between like one of the most jarring things in the world to me was I don't think the movie did a good job making it clear when we were jumping hundreds of years into the past. Like we're with a character and then suddenly we're with the character in Babylon, and I'm like, wait. Yeah. what happened? Where?
Yeah. That's one of the things that makes it feel like four movies stitched together. And the other thing I mean by that is like it actually feels like about four movies worth of content and story that have just been crammed into too short of a time frame, or like a novel. It feels like and I know what you mean when you say you can see what she was trying to do. Like it's you can see the outline of a interesting story. Mm-hmm. You can see the connecting dots, but none of it is dramatized and none of it works. And I don't care about the characters, and it's rushed and it's bad.
I like the character of Cersei could have been really interesting. I don't actually. I'm trying to say this without spoiling the movie. She doesn't have a struggle. Like she has a physical struggle, with other characters, but like the problem the movie has. Excuse me. And I'm going to try to say this as broadly as possible. This movie posits a pretty fundamental moral question on itself, right? Mm-hmm. Like there is this very clear moral question being at the center of this movie that all of our Eternals are surrounding. And the movie is declaring its protagonist correct in their opinion of the question, which that's fair. That's what stories do. The protagonist usually is the one that has the right opinion if you're having some choice. Not always, but usually. I think that's fine. The problem is their opinion is never challenged in any kind of interesting way. It's just kind of understood that they are correct because they are the protagonist, and that's it.
Yeah. It's only challenged through punching, not through actual dialogue. Yeah. Which, I mean, there's a lack of kind of the interesting, there's no real interesting foil dynamic going on here. It's more of the problem is it's more of a mystery film than it is it's more of a mystery film than your average superhero film. And then the resolution of the mystery, once you realize it, you're just like, oh, they were the villain the whole time. And then there's a fight with punching and lasers. So
yeah. Well, and the deviants as characters, I don't get why they were in the movie.
That
I mean,
seemed like
to have stuff to punch is the answer. But
it seemed like a big missed opportunity. Again, no spoilers, but like the failure to do anything interesting with that and to just sort of end it. I was like, oh, I thought we were building towards something.
I couldn't believe that was just that was it.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
We were building to this. God, this is impossible to talk about without spoilers. But let's just say spoilers for Eternals for the next 2 minutes because I need to talk to you about this, but I can't talk around it. So yeah, so okay, spoilers starting now. So we have this deviant that is like evolving and becoming something more, and basically becoming an Eternal in many ways. Mm-hmm. And then he's dead.
Yeah. He's absorbed the souls of some of the Eternals.
Yeah.
And you don't know, like, is he becoming something good? Like, the only reason he wants to kill you is because you have been butchering his kind for billions of years.
Yeah.
Like who are you to just kill him? Like, well, did you try talking to him at all? No.
Yeah. No, he doesn't even fight the main people. He just becomes the revenge story for what's her? I don't remember any of the characters' names.
Yeah,
for Angelina Jolie's character because he killed her friend. It's like, this is what I mean by the actual moral choice in the movie is not dramatized, because he is kind of the perfect representation for why Cersei is right. And it would be really interesting if the way Icarus discovers that he was wrong about this whole thing is through interaction with the deviant.
Yeah.
Instead of the reason why he finally relents in the end has nothing to do with anything to do with the moral decision of the movie, and just has to do with the fact that he has the hots for her, and so he can't hurt her.
Yeah.
And so he relents, which has not, like, that's the worst dramatic end to it at all. That like, it's not that he realized that she was correct. It's just that he couldn't bring himself to kill her. Yeah. That's it. That's nothing. Yeah, that's nothing.
Just imagine it. I mean, I'm not saying it would have fixed the movie by any means, but just imagine if the change had actually come because he met that deviant and realized that the Celestials make mistakes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if they make mistakes of this kind, what if they're wrong about the whole necessity of the cycle?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting to me that the objection to the whole cycle thing isn't like, what if the Celestials are just wrong? Like what if there's some other way we could do this? It's like it's actually the not necessarily wrong, but much sort of more simple and immediate response of just like, well, it's wrong to kill billions of people, which I agree with. Like it just, like, that's one problem, is like, that's so obviously the morally correct answer that you can't really steelman Icarus's position of
right.
Like, he's basically just like, I serve the Celestials. That is what I do. I pass butter.
But don't you understand that billions more lives will be created?
I don't care.
That is the movie. Like, this is what I mean, that I think left into Chloe Zhao's hands entirely, you could actually do work to make that not a clearly incorrect moral choice. Mm-hmm. And like, you could make an argument, a pro Celestial argument that is a little more complex than just, no, we're trading 7 billion lives for 50 billion future lives. And that's the correct calculation, right? And then everyone with a brain says, no, that's not how any of that works ever.
Well, isn't it interesting? I mean, I find this just more than a little bit interesting, that this is basically the theme of the entire MCU is trading lives. Like, Thanos wants to wipe out half of the life because, I mean, there's theories that Thanos wants to wipe out half of life because he knows about the Celestials. I don't have any opinion on whether that's true or not. But that would like delay the Celestial plan.
Sure.
And in any case, though, it's like Thanos' willingness to trade lives. What does Cap always say? we don't trade lives. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally that's the thesis statement of Captain America and sort of the thesis statement of the Infinity Saga. And here, once again, we have on a mass scale, we have the idea of trading lives, which it's, I mean, the whole MCU is sort of anti-utilitarian, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that's interesting.
It is interesting, but like we've not to be a dick, but been there, done that. Like we've already kind of declared that the clear, like the Infinity Saga put a button on that. Like we made that decision and said, no, that's not, that's not what we're gonna do. That's wrong, and us winning kind of proves conclusively that's wrong. And then here this comes on the back of the Infinity Saga and says, all right, but what if we trade lives?
Yeah, you haven't considered what if it's bigger numbers. Yeah, okay. It was already half of all life in the universe, though. But now there's a multiverse. Okay, all right. Is this the only reason you had a multiverse, is so that we could trade multiverse lives now?
Probably. That's gonna be the Secret Wars big. It's just gonna be like, we can, if we eliminate all of the universes, we can ensure ours goes on. Did they already do that in Loki? I feel like that's already happened in Loki.
That's sort of the inverse happened, and now I think the decision has to be: are we going to bring it back into being one universe, and in doing so sacrifice all the other universes?
Yeah.
In order to have stability.
What if the twist is we do trade lives? That's the big twist now.
That would be really funny if
Cap has retired, and now we're like, no, we're totally in the trading life business.
The conclusion of the MCU is just like like everyone's dead. Loki is the only surviving superhero, and he's just like, yeah, sure. The end.
Oh my god, I love it.
It ends like The Sopranos, just Loki standing there and it cuts to black. Yeah, sure.
Oh, that's perfect. So Eternals, pretty mixed overall. Pretty mixed.
I mean,
I think that was longer than 2 minutes.
That was longer than 2 minutes. Sorry, we'll do something about that.
I don't know what we can do.
Don't have listened this far.
Yeah. I feel like if you haven't seen the Eternals by now, you probably don't care about the Eternals. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It's bad.
It's bad.
Doof.
Speaking of The Sopranos, though, let's talk about the streaming wars, Matt.
Yeah, let's.
So the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is because the big news, not the big news. The big news this week was that Microsoft is buying Activision Blizzard, which is nothing to do with streaming, but holy shit, that's insane that happened, Matt. That's insane.
Yes, that is I don't even know what the implications of that are yet, but yeah, that's a big deal.
Huge, ridiculous. Activision Blizzard also owns the company called King, which is unironically the king of mobile gaming.
Okay.
So like Candy Crush, Candy Crush?
I've heard of it.
Basically any other mobile game you can think of now is owned by Microsoft.
So yeah. Apparently Microsoft is really good at like respecting the like what the thing is that their companies are doing that they buy. God, that was a terrible sentence. That they usually don't muck up what the companies are doing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I didn't really didn't want to talk about Activision Blizzard, but now that we're on it, I think the thing though is that Activision Blizzard is a company mired in controversy right now because turns out like all the Blizzard employees were being incredibly sexist and sexually harassing and assaulting the women on staff, like across the board in the company. So like this one could be one where Microsoft just sees the value in the IP and is just going to clean house management style. It just really, really wants to buy a whole bunch of IP. Because like, I mean, you think about this, like we're in a new console generation of hardware, but like, I feel like hardware as far as video games is going bye-bye. Like eventually hardware, like anything's going to be able to run anything.
Yeah.
And the winners in this league are the ones who have amassed the most amount of IP. Just like Microsoft is trying to posit themselves as the Disney of video games.
Yeah.
And so we've just got all the IP. And so you'll pay me for the privilege of getting your Halo and your Star Wars and your World of Warcraft and your Call of Duty and like your Candy Crush. Like,
yeah,
that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think the only, or at least the main reason why Google Stadia didn't work is lack of marketing, and part of lack of marketing is lack of IP with which to sell, right? If it's a bunch of stuff nobody has a strong investment in, then that's very different from marketing with like God of War 4 or whatever. So it's
bold prediction time, Matt. Here I go.
Okay, go.
We are less than half a decade away from seeing Microsoft games on Sony PlayStation.
Okay.
Or you can go even further and to say Microsoft has this thing called Game Pass, where it's basically video game Netflix, where you pay a monthly fee and there's a rotating collection of games that are on Game Pass that you can play for free. That's just and new games go on it all the time. I think we're going to see Game Pass on Sony PlayStation at some point. I think Microsoft is going to get so big that Sony basically has to go to the table with them, because right now they're just like, fuck off. No, we don't want to deal with you. Fuck, go away. But like they've bought Bethesda and now this, and it's just insane. It's just insane.
Yep. I think you might be right. That's a cool prediction though. 5 years I think is a reasonable timeline too. Yeah. So
I'm only saying this because this deal itself is not going to close until summer of 2023. So like these deals take forever to hash out and to figure out, and of course to get approved by the federal government. When is the last time you've seen the federal government like shut down a purchasing deal? I don't even think they do that anymore.
I think it might have happened like once in recent memory but I don't know.
I feel like it was T-Mobile something. Was it AT&T tried to buy T-Mobile and they said no? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that was something like that. Yeah.
Maybe it was Verizon. Someone tried to buy T-Mobile and the government said no. But I think that was during Obama's reign, and like Trump definitely would have said no to nothing. And I don't see Biden, like the Biden administration, shutting stuff like that down. But anyway, that's besides the point. What I really wanted to talk to you about was not video game streaming, but movie and television streaming, because the fourth quarter results came out for Netflix this past Friday, Matt, and they didn't meet their expectations. And so their company lost $50 billion in value in like 4 hours.
That's
which
bad.
Yes, that's bad. It's a really interesting place because Netflix has been kind of king shit of streaming for a decade now. Even as all these other companies have invested oodles of money, Netflix has remained on top. And okay, don't get me wrong, Netflix still on top. They still have the most subscriptions out of any service out here, but Netflix is highly leveraged to the point where they really don't actually make that much money in revenue. Their value is based entirely around their continued growth. And if that growth slows and or stalls, this is what happens. And so I don't know. We talked about this, I think 2 years ago when they had a bad quarter and then the pandemic happened and Netflix like dominated the pandemic for understandable reasons.
Yeah.
But now there's a lot more competitors in the market. And I mean, the thing about growth is when there's a limited total population, growth cannot stay constant. Eventually you're going to top off.
Yeah.
And what happens to your company and your valuation after? It's just like, I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There's only so many people who are going to get Netflix, and I think most of them already have it. I mean, you're at a certain point, you're relying on population growth, which is not a good thing to rely on since fertility is below replacement. It's funny. I'm looking at the stock price. The last time their stock was at the price that it is today was January 2020. So it's basically back before the pandemic, and that's bad for them. I do wonder, this is such a steep decline. I mean, basically this is a decline of like 40%. from the peak of where it was, at around November, December of 2021, 40% drop really quickly. So it's like, okay, maybe that's like people panic selling. Maybe it really is that bad, though. I mean, maybe maybe the financials are just showing like, you know what, the pandemic was great for you because everybody stayed home and so everybody had Netflix. But now everybody works from home now. But the point is, you didn't see the tremendous growth that we wanted you to see. So we're just gonna rescale everything back to where we were at the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we assume that people's appetite and ability to buy these streaming platforms is limited, which is true on both accounts, the problem Netflix is having right now is, what is their killer program? Like I mean, they had the success of Squid Game was huge for them in the fall, and I think that's probably when you saw their market price the highest it was. I think they probably did very good with Squid Game, but like, here's the thing, like, first of all, Disney Plus is Disney Plus. They're always going to have like everything that you want on there that's Disney, because they own half of everything. And then HBO Max has actually like thrown down on this table. Like we talked when HBO Max launched, how much they bungled the launch and how confusing it was, because there was like HBO Now and HBO Go and HBO Max and HBO, and there was a lot of confusion of like what is what and how does this work, and there were a lot of people ridiculing. I mean, it went so badly that AT&T decided to sell this whole division and just get rid of it and get completely out of the entertainment industry. And they sold. I think that deal is still being worked on, but it's going to happen. AT&T is done with this. But this thing happened, Matt, where starting into 2021, HBO made the very controversial decision to say every Warner Brothers movie that's released in theaters this year is going to release on HBO Max day and date. And it worked. Uh-huh. They got a shit ton of new subscribers. They beat every expectation they had. They beat the original expectation quarter to quarter, and then they adjusted based off of new quarter data, and they still beat that at the end of the year. I think they're at like 73 point something million subscribers, and I think when HBO Max first launched, the combination of HBO and HBO Max was at like 40 something. So it's almost doubled in a year and a half, 2 years. They made a gamble, and a lot of people were pissed off about them. Theaters were certainly pissed off at them about it, but it paid off. It became the service that you needed to have because the Matrix was on there. It worked. It worked.
I think they probably knew that it would too. Like, they probably were looking at their numbers and they were like, they know exactly what movies people are excited about and how excited they are. And they have a forecast of how much people are going to spend for those. They knew that people were going to be excited about The Matrix. They probably even knew people were going to be excited about Dune. It was something of a surprise to us, the public, that Dune did as well as it did. But to them, I bet they were like, no, we know exactly how much hype there is for this movie. We've been hyping it for 2 or 3 years at this point. Mm-hmm. And they were just like, well, how do we capture that hype? Because people probably won't go see it in the theaters in the numbers that we would like them to. So we're going to put it, like you said, day and date on the service. And that sort of decision sort of, multiplied across all of the little micro decisions, I think, added up. And it was, I mean, I see exactly why, many directors objected to this. But from their point of view, looking at the numbers, I'll bet that this was like, Babe Ruth pointing the stands, like they knew this was going to work.
They lost Christopher Nolan forever. That was the price of this decision. He will never make another movie for that studio again. Although never say never.
Yeah, right. But hand somebody a big enough garbage bag full of money. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting space right now, and I'm worried for poor Netflix. I think the thing about Netflix is I think what we're gonna see, they're gonna be a shift. Like I'm trying to think of like the outside of Squid Game, what is the last time there was like a huge popular ongoing show on that platform? I guess Stranger Things. I guess. I don't know. Like, there's the thing that actually Netflix is finding the most amount of success in is their reality television programming. They're kind of becoming the reality TV place for. They're kind of emulating the basic cable or the network television model in a lot of ways on their service, where they're producing a lot of reality TV. They're still going to have your occasional prestige picture. There's there. I think there's another Scorsese film coming out on Netflix this year. There's a lot of movies coming out this year, man. There's a lot of movies, but there's still plenty of stuff coming out on it. But I think, like, as far as playing in the streaming space, it's going to be really interesting, what they do and how they respond. And then you have Apple over here, just being Apple and having infinity money, and just, like, I don't know how well their subscription numbers are doing, but, like, they don't seem to care. They're just going to keep getting great stuff. There's a lot of great stuff on Apple. There's a lot of great stuff. And they just came out with a new ad, Matt, that you need to watch because it's hilarious. It's just like John Hamm sitting on a couch in front of a TV complaining about how every star is on Apple TV except for him. And it's really funny. And, like, it really gets the point across just how much stuff they have on there, because he's literally just flipping through and, like, doing, oh, Denzel. And then he's leaving a message on Tom Hanks's voicemail. It's like, hey, Tom, just saw Fitch. That's great. Oh, and I saw you had another one, two on Apple TV, huh? It's just really, it's a really good ad. It's really clever and smart, and Apple TV is just killing it. I don't know. There's lots of crazy stuff going on. I still think at the end of the day, what we're going to see is consolidation. Speaking of Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard in a $68 billion deal. Jesus, remember when Star Wars was bought for $4 billion? Like, all of Star Wars was bought for $4 billion.
My God, yeah.
I really do think, like, the Peacocks and perhaps the Paramount Pluses are going to be gobbled up by these other streaming services. Like if I'm Apple, I'm probably looking at, like, at Peacock or Paramount Plus, and, like, that would be a great addition to our stuff. If I'm Netflix and I'm worried about, my fourth quarter projections and what a Q1 2022 looks like if we don't make our projections again, wouldn't it be great to just drop some money and add a shitload of bunch of new stuff to my platform?
Yeah.
So I think that's the way we're going.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. It's definitely hard to keep coming up with these, shows that get the zeitgeist going.
Yeah.
Like, and even now, I think that they're not even trying to get the whole zeitgeist. Like, it's funny to me because, yeah, I compare and contrast the Game of Thrones versus the Wheel of Time show, and it's like the Game of Thrones really, like, everybody was watching that. That was, everybody knows about that.
Yeah.
Wheel of Time is much more niche, but it's not. It's still popular, but, like, it's as popular as anything gets now.
Sure.
I guess objectively speaking, Squid Game was probably more popular, but, like, I think you know what I mean. In a relative sense, if I walk up to people on the street and ask, like, did you watch Wheel of Time? It's like, yeah, odds are probably no, actually. So anyway, I think that they're not even trying to do that anymore. So I think I think like you said, instead of just banking on having, like, the one show that everybody's going to watch, you actually just try to have the 5 shows where if you canvass everyone, probably everybody's watching at least one of these shows. And that requires just having more content, which might require consolidation. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that the thing about something like Squid Game is I think you can't even use that in analysis, because Squid Game is one of those things that, like, is impossible to predict for.
Yeah.
Like, how rare is it that you get something for nothing? Like, they spent basically no money on Squid Game and then it blew up. Like, I don't think you can accurately forecast for something like that. And you can't, like, you can't spend. The mistake is to try to do get the next Squid Game, right? And then you throw millions and millions of dollars at the thing you think is the next Squid Game, and if you're right, you make a lot of money. If you're wrong, oops, I just wasted $10 million. Whereas Squid Game just kind of happened organically. So I think you're right that like if I'm looking at this stuff, like, do you need to have a Squid Game to be successful in this, or do you just need 20 things that 50 million people amongst them really like one or two of them?
Right. And I think that's a better bet anyway, because I wonder how many people actually bought a Netflix subscription for Squid Game, like,
that's the thing about these analytics and these, every time we have these conversations is we don't know. Like, of course Netflix knows, but we don't how many, like, I would love to see like how many people re-upped Netflix, like former subscribers that canceled that rejoined after the Squid Game blew up, like we're like, oh, well, we were out of the Netflix game, but then, everyone's talking about this. So
but I would just guess it's not very high because, if you say to me, hey, there's a foreign language, drama, I don't even know how to pitch that. I don't even know how to pitch Squid Game. The only reason I watch it because I already had Netflix. So it's like it's effortless for me to just check it out. But if anyway, like contrast that with, this streaming service has like all of these different things, and you're probably going to like at least one of them. That's a much easier sell. So yeah.
And I mean, the thing that we have to say at the end of this whole conversation, what was the most watched television show of 2021?
I don't know. What was it?
NCIS.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a show on network TV, CBS. Like that. There, we're most people, like, Squid Game was one of the most popular shows on Netflix. Most people probably didn't watch it because relatively these markets are still small as compared to what like the big network TV shows are doing. The other one was Yellowstone, a show that appears on like Paramount Network that isn't on any streaming service because they fucked up the rights to it when they were first deciding these kind of things.
This is fascinating. I want to look into this more because honestly, I feel like that might sort of be a statistical artifact sort of thing in a way that I'm not able to. I don't mean to say statistical artifact as if what you just said isn't true. It's more like it might not mean all that much that it is true. It's kind of like, like how much of the news network ratings are just because, well, those are the only news channels. So what else are you going to watch on the television?
Sure.
Like I don't know. I'm not making my point clearly, but it's you've given me some questions to look into on my own.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest question for me would be like, how many people watch NCIS every week that have a Netflix subscription, and like are making the choice to watch a network TV show instead of watching a streaming platform. And I have no idea what the answer to that question is. And I wonder, I mean, how do you even have that data? I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, are they watching the new episode of NCIS? Like, are they tuning in specifically to watch the new episode? Or is it more like how when we were in college, we would like put on like the 2-hour marathon of Law and Order because our brains were jellified.
Yeah.
And we just watch that. And it's not that we love Law and Order. It's just like, yeah, it's what's on. It's designed to go down smooth,
Fair. Yeah.
I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
I don't know either. I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating. It's interesting to talk about. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I'm really intrigued by what's happening in this space. I really want a Peacock subscription, Matt, because there's a MacGruber television show on Peacock, and I watched the first episode and I loved it to death. And it's the only one I don't have, and I'm just like, do I need another one? But I really want to watch MacGruber, so I'm really torn here. That's where I am right now. I don't want to pay for Peacock.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it, Scott. We'll talk about it.
This is how I ask Matt permission to use company money to watch MacGruber.
We'll see if we can scrape something together for you, Scott.
Yeah. I think that's going to do it for us, though. I think this is an episode. I think we talked about both of these things a little bit longer than I was planning to, which is something one of these days I'm going to stop being surprised about. But that day is not today. But that is all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on the Grand Budapest Hotel, on Marvel's The Eternals, or on the state of the streaming industry, or if you just like really, really like NCIS and feel like talking to us about it, I've never even seen it. It's probably good.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on our Twitter account @doofmedia, or make sure you check out the Reddit thread for this very episode. That will be posted right about when the episode comes out on r/doofmedia.
Yeah, I hope I didn't step into some kind of fandom conflict between NCIS fans and Law & Order fans.
You know, I really got to say that the Venn diagram of people listening to us and regularly watching Law & Order and NCIS is probably two circles very far apart from each other.
Well, you just get ready for that deluge of email, Scott.
I hope so.
Anyway, if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And of course, you can find this and all of our many shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. And of course, if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. You should be heading that way anyway to vote on whether the Grand Budapest Hotel should be getting into the canon or not. So while you're there, why not check out the different donation levels? And you get a whole bunch of cool stuff, bonus podcasts, monthly ones, weekly ones, ability to vote in all the different polls we do, like for book club, which is happening this Friday. If you're listening to this the day it came out, the 28th of January. Matt, what book are we doing for book club again? I can't remember.
Piranesi.
Thank you. That will be happening over on our YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, as Matt said, to make sure you don't miss those book clubs. Tons of stuff and tons of cool bonuses for joining us on Patreon. So do that. Patreon.com/doofmedia.
That's right. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. And I think that's finally going to do it for us this week. Next week on the show, we're doing another one of our Deconstructing Directors Addendum series, because finally, Matt, we are going to be taking a look at M. Night Shyamalan's Old. I cannot wait to talk to you about this movie.
I can't wait to watch it.
We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.